We're just walking to Soshigaya Park. Already I can hear skaters in the background. In front of me,
Back in episode 1, I told you that the Setagaya murder case had never even had a suspect.
I hear the skaters. I don't know if any of them would have been here 20 years ago.
Except, that's not entirely true. Over the years, there have been suspicions.
I think they probably weren't even born 20 years ago.
And people have been questioned. And in this episode, I'm going to find out who they were and why.
There's a possibility that skateboarder is involved in the case. And they were looking right through my eyes and trying to see if I'm involved in one way or another. I was like, no, fuck no.
From USG Audio and What's the Story Sounds, this is Faceless, episode 4. So far, we've explored 3 theories around the Faceless Man. We've examined the belief that he's Korean, unpacked the claim from a mysterious Japanese reporter that the killer was actually a hitman, and we've examined a witness sighting that places 3 men as being part of the crime, and at least one of them disappearing in the mountains north of Tokyo. We've learned about the killer's DNA, how he's mixed race, and more likely to be from Korea or China than from Japan. And we've heard about his strange behaviour inside the crime scene in the hours after the murders, drinking tea, eating ice cream, and using the computer. But there's one other thing that the Faceless Man did in that house. One other act which could tell us more about him than anything we've unpacked so far. He changed his clothes. After the murders, the Faceless Man stripped out of his clothes and put on a new outfit belonging to one of his victims, Mikio. And the clothes he took off, the ones he'd been wearing to carry out the murders, he left them for the police to find. Okay, so Ryushi, tell me exactly how they're described by the Tokyo police. I'm on the phone to Ryushi, my partner in this podcast, who's based in Tokyo. And we're talking about the clothes that the killer wore. I can see a picture in front of me, on a wanted poster for the Faceless Man. It shows a mannequin wearing the killer's outfit, but the writing is all in Japanese, and I want Ryushi to tell me exactly how the clothes are described.
So the killer's he was wearing a hat. It's called a crusher hat, an AirTech jacket. The sweatshirt he's wearing is called a raglan shirt. Gloves, which are made by Edwin. The shoes are Slazenger, 27.5 centimeters in size. And then there's a hip bag, muffler/scarf, handkerchiefs. No pattern on the handkerchief. 2 handkerchiefs of this kind were found on the scene. And then, of course, there's the kitchen knife, which was sold under the trade name of Sekima Magoroku Ginju.
Okay, so if that hasn't painted a picture for you, let me try. You already know about the sneakers, white tennis shoes, but they weren't left at the scene. But the footprints found at the house mean the officers can be sure exactly what type of sneaker they were and what size. Then, working up, he's wearing a white sweatshirt, the navy blue or indigo sleeves, concealed inside a padded black jacket. Then there's black gloves, plaid or tartan scarf, and a grey bucket hat. And around his waist, a hip bag, grey-green in colour, with black straps. As you would expect, with the case not immediately solved, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department began to search for any clues that the clothing could offer. I told you in the last episode how the Slazenger shoes, a British brand, were found to have been manufactured in South Korea. And while those shoes were available in Korea and Japan, that size, a 9.5, was not sold in Japan. But the rest of the outfit, well, that appears to be Japanese in origin. The grey hat was knitted, and cops found that it had been sold between September 1999 and November 2000, so up until a month before the murders. The black jacket was manufactured by Uniqlo, a Japanese high street fashion brand, and was part of their newest season range. It had only been available since September 2000. The sweatshirt the killer wore, white with blue or indigo sleeves, is known as a raglan design, and it was sold in a Japanese store called MX. It wasn't a big seller. Only 10 of those sweatshirts were ever sold in Tokyo, only 130 across the entirety of Japan. Former chief of the investigation, Takeshi Tsuchita, told me they tried to trace every owner, but with no luck.
We gathered all the information that we could. We thought that amongst his clothes we'd find one item that could help us. But it wasn't so easy. They were all bought at different times.
Crucially, none of the items of clothing were a smoking gun. None could tell the police who the killer actually was.
We appealed to the public, and we took pictures of all the clothes, but nothing definitive came back.
But if you think about the clothing, I think you can learn something. Hear me out. Maybe these are genuinely the killer's clothes. They're not an outfit bought purely for the task at hand. They're not a disguise. Think about it. If you're going to buy an outfit to commit a murder, you wouldn't go to a department store where they might keep your records or have cameras. You'd go secondhand to a thrift store. But this guy, he's wearing shoes apparently bought from South Korea, a hat purchased more than a month before the crimes, a jacket which is new season, and a sweatshirt which is pretty rare. It feels to me more like he just got dressed in the morning in the clothes he has at home. There's one idea floating around this case about the clothes. That they're young, trendy. They may not look it now, but they were in fashion. They were cool. And as the police and the media pointed out, they look like the kind of clothes worn by one group in particular. Skaters. But my first feeling was that this outfit was weird. I don't know, man. Like, is it just me? Because the outfit, you just look at that outfit, you're just eyeballing the outfit, and it looks a bit weird to me. Like, it's kind of not one thing or another thing. You've got tennis shoes, you've got like a brand new Uniqlo jacket, you've got like a bucket hat. It just kind of feels like a mess or a mix of different things.
Well, listen, in 2000, I was a child in the year 2000, so I wasn't paying much attention to anything apart from Power Rangers and Pokemon and Beyblade, I think. But the police describe it as a skater outfit,
like a skateboarder outfit, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what skaters wore in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I mean, I guess it is baggy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Theory number 4, the skater. The killer was a skateboarder who fell out with the Miyazawa family after they complained about noise from the local skate park. And he took out deadly revenge against them.
My name is Masafumi Kajitani. I'm from Osaka area, but I live in Tokyo now.
This is Masafumi Kajitani, someone who knows the skating world in Japan as well as anyone.
I started skateboarding in Seattle, Washington, My family moved there when it was 1985, so I started skating in 85.
Masafumi is talking to me from his home in Tokyo. He's a laid-back guy who speaks good English, and he was only too happy to talk me through his love of skating and how it earned him a living.
I skated in Japan and become like a sponsored skater, not a pro. Mm-hmm. And then after all these injuries, I started working like behind the scene, writing articles and translating interviews and working for magazines, media, and that's what I do right now.
Masafumi's business is an online skating magazine. He translates articles, reports on the major events. And in recent years, with skateboarding becoming an Olympic sport in Tokyo, he's busier than ever. It's a far cry from the four-wheeled hobby Masafumi enjoyed as a teenager.
In the 90s, skateboarding was more underground. The general people didn't really know about it, but now it's very popular. I think people will think skateboarding as like a kid's toy.
Okay.
It's not something that you do seriously or something that you pursue as a career. Mm-hmm. You can't make money from skateboarding. That's what people think. It was something that teenagers do to like kill time, like not really a positive image. I mean, baggy clothes, maybe dyed hair or something. Maybe some skaters had earrings back in the day. It wasn't normal to the general people, the fashion. And I mean, skateboarders had an image that they're very rough, punk.
Oh, really? So, like, at best, it's a bunch of kids wasting their time, and at worst, like, maybe even, like, some criminality.
Right. Getting in fights, maybe stealing something from the convenience store. Nothing, like, major, but, yeah, maybe associated to some kind of, like, minor crime.
The issue with how skaters were perceived wasn't unique to Japan. It was a worldwide subculture. Kids up to no good, hanging around in street corners. They were noisy. They looked different. They set themselves apart from more general society. And perhaps what really put skaters on a collision course with authorities was that they would skate in and around everyone else.
There are people skating in the streets.
Right.
Which are called street skaters. And they jump downstairs, they grind handrails and ledges, and they destroy private property.
More kids are getting involved because they've seen it, so there's an awareness of skating existing or being a possibility for them. But then on the other hand, there are more adults screwing with them and giving them hassle because they're making noise or damage or whatever.
They tend to skate at night, late at night, like past midnight. So all these noise complaints are the main thing, I think.
Masafumi wasn't a skater who would cause trouble. He saw conflicts from the other side, that he and his friends just wanted to enjoy their hobby. And in the year 2000, one of the places he would go to was the skate park in Soshigaya, the one directly behind the Miyazawa's house.
The summer, I was there, and it was a nice atmosphere. I mean, we didn't get any complaints from anyone. There were, like couple, family just hanging out right by the skate park. Mm-hmm. And the locals were nice. I mean, I didn't feel any kind of like negative atmosphere. It's pretty quiet. It's pretty peaceful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The skate park in Soshigaya is just a few yards away from the house. It was owned by the local authority, and it wasn't particularly well equipped. But with the houses around it gradually being knocked down, it was considered a place where skaters could go if they wanted to be out of the way. And at that time, it was one of the few spaces like that in the whole of Tokyo.
That place is very residential. Mm-hmm. So I think people come to that park from all parts of Tokyo, mm-hmm. In a sense. There were locals, but it wasn't like there weren't any skate shops around there. So that park was somewhere that people just went, right, strict for skateboarding,
Right. so skaters would flock to Soshigaya Park. And, it seems, would occasionally be spoken to by local residents.
I remember one of my friends saying that he was skating at that park and Miyazawa-san came out and started complaining about the noise.
Oh, really? To your friend?
Yeah, I actually remember my friend saying that.
Oh, wow. But you'd never heard about that up until
between Miyazawa-san and skaters back then. Kind of stuff happens a lot between skaters and residents. And people know how to handle that kind of stuff,
Right.
We'll say just, okay, I'm sorry, we'll just go home, okay, it's getting late,
Right.
We're not trying to, start a fight or anything with the residents. So
Right.
I'm sure skaters, handled it, very nicely.
In all likelihood, those neighbours who complained were the Miyazawas. They'd made it known that the noise was irritating, and while most of the skaters were respectful, it's no great leap to assume that occasionally crowds and the noise could get out of hand. So, after the murders, when the police looked into the Miyazawa's background or any potential conflicts, the only thing they could find was reports of a clash with the skaters.
Nearby in the park, there was a skate park, and the sound of skating was quite loud. It was forbidden to skate at night, but oftentimes non-locals would travel from afar to skate there, and they wouldn't know the rules. In these cases, Mikio cautioned the skaters. He also went to the park management office to complain. We wondered whether a skater group or an individual skater held a grudge against Mikio because of this, and we investigated the skaters heavily.
Could it be that a disgruntled skater had taken offence to the Miyazawa's complaint, had broken into their house and murdered the entire family because of a noise complaint? Well, the cops thought that it was possible. In fact, it was the only motive they had. And the clothes left behind by the killer, they were young, kind of baggy. They looked like skater clothes. So they began to question skaters. Before long, Masafumi was in their sights.
I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and I'm the host of a new podcast, Crime Story. Every week, we bring you a different crime, told by the storyteller who knows it best.
You got one witness who can't be found. You got another witness who's murdered.
We couldn't sugarcoat this story.
I was getting calls from Cosby's attorney threatening to sue every day.
Every crime in one way or another is a reflection of who we are as a people, as a city, as a country.
Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
A couple of years after the murder, I moved to Tokyo, and there was a card, business card, in my post box, and that was the detective's card. So I called him. I got scared. I called him, and he told me to come to a coffee shop. And he told me that it was clearly about the Setagaya murders.
Right.
And there was two detectives asking me questions.
Just like in a coffee shop.
Said that, and he said that, the suspect, there's a possibility that skateboarder is involved in the case. And he said that they're making sure, to talk to all the skaters that had come to Soshigaya Park back in 2000. And they've done all this research. I mean, they knew all the famous skaters back in year 2000. They've looked through all the skate magazines. They've gone through all the skate videos, and they knew all these names. And they showed me photos of a family photo of Miyazawa family, and they also showed me a photo of the actual murder weapon, which was a sashimi knife.
Oh, wow.
And they were looking right through my eyes and trying to see if I'm involved in one way or another. I was like, no, fuck no.
Right.
But Yeah, and they took my fingerprint.
Right there in the coffee shop?
Yeah, right there in the coffee shop, they took my fingerprints.
Wow.
And they looked at it, and they just, as soon as they look at my fingerprints, they knew, oh, you're not the suspect, don't worry. I'll give you this, I'm not going to use this for any kind of report. A lot of my friends had the same experience with the detectives. I think he was asking questions to skaters and getting information. Like, who was skating at Soshigai Park back in 2000? Just give me names.
Right.
And I think I was in one of the names.
Masafumi's account proves that the skater theory really was high on the police priority list. They were tracking down skaters, finding where they lived, and informally interviewing them about the crime. But of course, Masafumi couldn't tell them anything. He wasn't responsible. But then he told me how cops had let slip 2 more details from the scene. Details which apparently added weight to their skater theory.
And they just asked me about, you know what Drakkar Noir is? And I said, yes, that's something that was popular in the 80s and the 90s because Christian Hosoi wore it, you know?
Drakkar Noir, if you haven't heard of it, is a French aftershave. And in the 90s, a skater called Christian Hosoi did a publicity campaign as the brand's ambassador.
Christian Hosoi, he was like a superstar in the skate community back in the 80s. He came to Tokyo many times for skateboarding, for events and stuff, and he was wearing Drakkar. And since he was the superstar, all these skater kids in Japan started wearing him.
Oh, I see.
Every skater in Japan knew him. I mean, every skater in the world knew him. He was like the best skateboarder in the world.
Drakkar Noir was the aftershave of choice for young skaters who looked up to their superstar skating idol. And detectives had found the same aftershave, Drakkar Noir, had been worn by the killer. It was on his clothes. So, did this confirm their suspicions that the killer was a skater? And there was something else too. The hip bag.
They told me that there were stuff in the fanny pack that could, be related to skateboarders.
Cops told Masafumi that inside the bag they'd found grains of a substance like fiberglass, a substance which skaters would use as grip tape on their boards. It seemed to Masafumi that they'd done a lot of work on the skater theory. Did you discuss that with your friends in the skating community, or?
Yeah, I did. I mean, some skaters didn't even mention names because, skaters don't like police. Mm-hmm. I was like, come on, a whole family got murdered. I mean, help them out.
Right.
But there were some skaters who were like, fuck the cops.
Right. It's almost like even if even if my friends didn't do anything wrong, I don't even want their names to even come in to the police orbit or whatever.
We all knew that skaters didn't do it.
Right.
There's not a chance.
Right.
I mean, skaters don't do that.
Right.
And police and the news say that the killer was wearing skater clothes. Mm-hmm. But from our point of view, that's not skater clothes.
Hold on. What? I'd always assumed the skater clothes, that was accurate. Not in doubt at all. And now I had a skater telling me, no way.
Didn't fit at all. I mean, he was wearing that, what people call it crusher hat, that beanie, bucket hat type thing. We don't wear that. Or that baseball shirt. That's pretty whack, and the shoes. I mean, that sneaker, that Slazenger or something.
Right. Yeah, those are like squash shoes or something. That's like if you're going to play tennis or if you're going to play squash or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's not skater clothes.
So you think that they just kind of looked at these kind of generally baggy clothes and they just said, because there's a skate park next door, and the clothes are baggy, so it was a skater.
Probably, but I don't think that the clothes were. I don't think it was baggy though. I mean, skaters wore baggier clothes back then.
But baggier than the actual clothes this guy left behind.
Yeah.
I mean, he's wearing like a baseball shirt, right? Like a long sleeve baseball shirt. Masafumi says the clothes aren't what you would expect a skater to wear, and he should know, skating is his entire world. But if he's right, why did the police spend so much time exploring this theory? Remember, he was fingerprinted 2 years after the crime. Even today, the skater theory is well known and often reported on. Was that purely because of the proximity of the skate park and the reported arguments between Mikio and the skaters? Was it because the killer wore Drakkar Noir? Or is it simply the case that someone early on in the investigation thought the killer's clothes looked like a skater and the theory just stuck? I've spoken to dozens of skating shops, ex-skaters, and people involved in that scene in Japan. I even reached out to Christian Hosoi, the celebrity skater who perhaps inadvertently provided the link between Drakkar Noir and the skating community. Lots of them wanted to distance themselves from a murder, and really, who can blame them? But all of them that I spoke to said that the Faceless Man didn't really look like a skater. But one of them did say something interesting. They didn't want to be recorded, but they did say, "It kind of looks like the sort of thing you might wear if you wanted to look like a skater, but didn't know too much about it." In other words, maybe the killer had tried to put together an outfit to appear like he was a skater, maybe to explain why he was in the area, or just to disguise himself with some unusual clothing. Maybe this was a disguise after all. There was one other item which the killer left at the scene. Well, two handkerchiefs. They were black and made by Japanese designer Muji. But it wasn't the make of the handkerchiefs which caught the eye of the investigators, or where they'd been purchased. What was interesting was what the handkerchiefs were used for. It appeared that the killer had used the fabric to wrap around the handle of the knife, twisted and wrapped in such a way that was distinct. A hole had been cut into the middle, as a part of an elaborate wrap, and the handle pushed through the hole with the fabric then pulled around it. Investigators wondered if it was a technique used elsewhere, and they tracked down a lead, that Chinese workers at a fish factory would use a handkerchief in exactly the same way, to prevent the knife slipping from their grasp. And it was a technique used widely in the Philippines, in ceremonial events, and even by soldiers. So could that be a clue to the killer's identity? Did he work at a local fish factory? Could he have come from the Philippines? Officers from Tokyo Metropolitan Police followed both leads, but none provided a suspect. The knife, they learned, was a sashimi knife, the kind used by chefs to cut through raw fish to prepare sushi. It wasn't particularly unusual or rare, but detectives made inquiries to find anyone who had sold such a knife in the days before the murder. 1,500 of these knives were ever made, and they were on sale from June 2000, which is 6 months before the murders. And they were cheap, around $25. And Chief Suchita told me they were trying to find everyone who had bought one.
Of course, we investigated all shops in the area where they sold the Yanagiba knife at the time. We investigated all the stores in the area, and there was one shop where someone bought just a single knife by itself. A single knife. Usually, if you go to a supermarket, you would buy food products as well. But this person bought just a knife. And so there was some suspicions around them, and we managed to get an image of their face on CCTV.
Whoa, an image of the Faceless Man. Why hadn't I seen this? There's mentions of CCTV and the supermarket in a couple of the news articles, but I'd never seen this image, or even knew for sure it existed. Perhaps this was the clue that could help my search.
Last year, it was determined that this person was not the killer. And so the store where the knife was bought is still unknown.
Just like with everything in this case, it's one step forward and one step back. The chief didn't tell me how they know for sure that the CCTV doesn't show the killer. And I can't understand what new information the images can present, which they didn't show 20 years ago. But the chief assured me that the CCTV of the shopper buying the knife was not the suspect. There's one other item the killer took to the scene, which he left there, which we need to unpack in more detail. It's the fanny pack, the grey-green bag he likely wore around his waist. It was large, big enough to carry a small laptop, a wallet, and knife. It had been manufactured in Osaka and sold across Japan. There were nearly 3,000 of them made, and they stopped being sold in January 1999, almost 2 years before the murders. Judging by the appearance of it, this bag was well used. It showed normal signs of wear and tear. Presumably it contained the knife as the killer made his way to the property. And we've already heard there were small fragments of a glass-like substance, perhaps grip tape for a skateboard. Forensic tests would later find hairs belonging to the killer inside the bag, and some small amounts of red fluorescent paint too. But there was something else in the bag, which changes the entire focus of this investigation. Sand. And not just any old sand, because, as we'll find out in the next episode, detectives could work out where that sand had come from. And their tests showed that the sand inside the bag worn by the Faceless Man was sand that came from a small town in California. This podcast was written and hosted by me, Nick Obregon. My producers for What's the Story Sounds are Darrell Brown and Sophie Ellis. In Japan, my producer is Ryushi Lindsay. Sound design by Tom Brewins. Our music is composed by James Warburton and KPM Music. Our USG audio team includes Josh Bloch and Jennifer Sears. This is a USG audio podcast in collaboration with What's the Story Sounds. If you have any information or leads on this case, please email faceless@whatsthestorysounds.com or reach out to us on Twitter. And if you've enjoyed this series, please leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. And check out more USG audio podcasts at usgaudio.com.